Can we come closer?
I think this is close.
Close enough.
Welcome to Adventures in the Shift. This is Michael One and Christi Hannah Joy.
So my favorite thing is, we're going to do things a little bit different.
Yeah, we are.
So last time we did this,
Yes.
I looked right here the entire time and I avoided looking right there. And now I'm going to play that up. I'm going to look here and I'm going to change that up a little bit. Because part of what I think, I work on many levels at the same time.
I know.
And often when I'm talking about one thing, I'm actually thinking about something different in what I'm doing with. So this Adventures in the Shift, this thing that you and I are doing, is being discovered. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, but you and I are figuring that out, and there is a third party. The third party is the person who's sitting in front of a screen right now. And
I want to look in there. Is there someone in that little box?
There's someone in that box. So I'm gonna try to talk more into that, and because the last time it felt it was just you and me, and I felt like we were having a conversation, but I kept part of that conversation separate from the audience or from the witness. Witness is a better word because that's what it is. And now we're gonna look a little bit more.
Right, and so I think that's powerful because you're moving out of the YouTube listener broadcast mindset into the what we are doing is telling stories of our of our experience as we're traveling with the starboard, and as we're discovering kind of how the river and the stars are coming together for us, which is a whole nother big story that we haven't even touched yet. Our whatever, you know what I mean. You're now you're shifting it into storytelling and having a witness, and without a witness, the story, there's something missing without a witness. Definitely. Right.
Well, I think before it was just a conversation here, that was very obvious.
Yeah.
I almost felt like I'm on a pulpit.
Yeah, I call it channeling. You don't identify with this, but I have watched some of your videos, and I'm he's channeling. He's totally, I know my Michael, and that's not quite Michael. He's channeling something right now, and that's cool.
And what we had been doing, so I would do that, and I would feel it, and afterwards, I would feel really shitty in my body,
whole body would hurt.
and I would hurt. But what we did when it was just me and you, but I also think of that you say channeling, I think it's storytelling. There's the in the broadest definition of that word. And then the last thing we did was I avoided the witness, and I'm aware there is it, and I'm delved into me and you having a conversation, but maybe someone's being eavesdropped. I'm a bit of an exhibitionist. I don't know if you know that, and so I like the fact when I know people are watching me, but this is now what there's an awareness. This is what do they call it? Breaking the third wall, breaking the fourth wall.
Right. Whereas with my podcast, that we just did, we're not looking at the camera.
Right.
Because I'm bringing that element of allowing someone to witness, a true exhibitionist.
Right.
You and I are just having a thing.
Right.
And someone else is allowed to listen or watch.
Right.
Because that's the nature of what I do. I'm pretty much bringing a therapy session out into public. Right. Right. But what you do is so different. And I think that it's, like you said, if it's stories that you're telling and there's a witness, I remember I took a storytelling performance class in college. So random. But the most important thing about storytelling, the first 4 steps, is syncing with your witness and and inviting them in, and becoming one with in consciousness, one with the gelling. Right. So
I want to go back to, is it the third wall or the fourth wall?
Oh, the fourth wall.
And that means you're suddenly you normally have a performance, and then the fourth wall means now I'm talking to the audience and hey, we're in on it.
It's powerful, yeah.
You know that I'm an actor, and I know that you're watching it, but we're going to talk about, so that's what I feel this evolution
yes.
of this series, this Adventures in the Shift is. And like, this is not a plan. You and I have not discussed this prior to this conversation we're having right now. This is just happening. And when you and I engage with reality, and it's true with anyone, like, so we step outside, we're like, okay, we went on this trip. Like, we're back in Pennsylvania right now. This is Pennsylvania backdrop.
Can't you tell? I love this quilt.
When we're stepping out and we're recording this, it is when we step out, we're like purposely meeting life based upon what mine and yours mission is.
Yeah.
Which is very much about whether we call it collapsing false timeline, collapsing false identity. This whole thing kind of falls around, all of that collapses to create space for what? The shift.
Yes.
So we call this Adventures in the Shift, because this is what that looks like, based upon how we're doing it.
Based upon our
perspective. And we're sharing it with the audience. But then it's becoming,
it's evolving.
It's evolving.
Because of the witness.
Because of the witness. And so here we are in episode 3.
Yes. Whose line is it anyway? Do you remember that show? It was on...
I know what that show is.
Oh, okay.
It's with the comedians.
Yeah.
I always had a real problem with it. Like, I couldn't stand anything about it.
Just there's the part where they like have to tag team. Like, they start on a skit, but no one knows where it's going, and then they just tag the next comedian in.
Yes.
What is that called?
Improvisation.
Improv. This is like improv transformational storytelling.
Totally. I've always tried to do that. I call I like to walk the live wire. Like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, and like feel what's going to happen.
Yes.
And it only happens with a witness.
Yeah. And so you're really grateful.
I'm really grateful.
And now will I gaze with the witness.
I think you're nuts.
We're kind of in the spirit of that. We were just talking about nuts.
Yes. All right. So we're episode 3.
Yes.
We're gonna cut this particular recording off, and how many more?
We've got about 30 minutes.
We got 30 minutes to talk. So okay.
So the villages.
So next up, we left off at did we do Juniper Springs? We did. We did Juniper Springs.
We had starboard, new moon.
Right.
Spring equinox, pink moon, starboard.
Okay. All right. So.
And then we went to Orlando.
Did I talk about the cop?
No.
All right. So we're going to begin with that. So, and I think the reason is, so we're stepping back. What's ironic is you and I live in the town where you grew up.
Yeah.
And.
For now.
And you haven't lived in that town for quite a bit, and coming back, it's a small town, right? It's got all sorts of different things. And this is probably true for anyone, but you could see it, right? I could feel the energy right now where I'm going. You're not the same person who you were.
No.
And like everyone changes and grows, but like the amount of growth of who you were when you grew up.
Are you mimicking?
What?
We just had this conversation, but I was saying this to you.
Yeah, that's what's funny about it. But normally, like, at least where we had been, we had lived together in, maybe not necessarily your parents' house, but in your hometown.
Yeah.
So now now we're stepping into mine.
Right.
So that was the setup. And what happened was, we got to get up. So we're at Juniper Springs, and we have to drive to Orlando to drop you off, to fly your daughter home, to then come back. I was going to pick you up, and we're going to drive to my parents' house in the Villages. And I had a day in Orlando, and I can't stand Orlando. All this sort of stuff, and I'm not really that excited about being, 1, in the Villages, 2, in my parents' house. All of that, I'm bringing that to this.
Yeah.
After everything you had just described, right? So we had to leave, and generally speaking, how many times has Naomi been late this year for school?
Let's not talk about that.
Is it greater than 20?
Yes.
Is it greater than 30?
Probably.
Okay, and the reason why is because generally speaking, getting up early and getting to the place is not your norm. Like that is my strong suit. Like I'm really good at so.
I'm really good at it when there's a lot of obstacles.
When there's a lot of obstacles.
Yeah, like when I know that like camp needs to break down.
Right.
I'm pretty good at it.
So this is how it began.
Yes,
so
yes.
This is what we had to be in Orlando, which was like, I don't know, 90 minutes.
Yeah.
90 minutes from the campsite to get you guys to fly.
Out of a national forest.
Into a major city. And we slept in we had a tent, Naomi had a tent, so we had to break down the tent, we had to break down camp, we had to pack everything up, and we had to leave. And we had to be on the road by 7 o'clock in the morning. I've never seen you do anything before 7 o'clock in the morning, much less all this. And I'm like, this ain't gonna happen. And we woke up, and for whatever reason, it was the first morning, we had thick as can be fog.
And rain,
everything was raining, all of this sort of stuff. But anyway, so like that kicked off like our event, and we both had like 4% or like very low percentage with our car or the phones. We needed the GPS. It wasn't an easy way. Like we were relying. So like that was like the setting of the whole thing.
Yeah.
We get you to the airport. Everything is fine, right time.
Smooth.
And you're like, all right, I'll see you in 8 hours.
Yeah.
So I got 8 hours in. I've got 8 hours in Orlando, and first thing I do is like I need to go and get my bearings. Like I need bearings because things like spin around in my life if I don't like stop every once in a while and like write in my notebooks and like do the things. Otherwise, like I really feel out of control.
Yeah.
Because I'm normally feeling out of control and I'm really out of control without. So I stop by at like a Orlando hotel. At the Holiday Inn, and I get my bearings and like all this sort of stuff, and I'm like, all right, where am I gonna go?
Wait, so make the switch now because I've heard this story 5 times.
All right.
Oh, there's like oh no, those aren't droplets.
Okay.
I thought there was droplets of water in the lens.
All right.
It's just the stars behind us.
It's the stars behind us.
So he's behind the.
So you know the stories. You've heard it 5 times, so you took it up.
No.
You can't throw that out there like you just took on responsibility.
No, I've heard the story 5 times and like, and I've witnessed it. So my witnessing energy is dry.
It's dry. Okay.
But you have all the witnesses here for it to be like.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
To get juicy.
So anyway, so I go to a coffee shop. First thing that happens is...
You're not going to stop looking at me.
So the first thing that happens is, and I'm caught up in the mystery, and I've been texting with like Ross Ben and the Pittsburgh guys, and I sit next to a guy who's reading a book called The Mysteries of Pittsburgh. I sneak a picture and I send it to him, and I'm just feeling really weird in Orlando, but I'm excited for the adventure. I'm like, I'm going to go to a park. And I'm like, okay, I got the phone. I'm like, all right, where's a park nearby? And I look at the parks, and there's one called like Lake Druid, and that's the one that right, like that
Lake
jumped
Druid.
Right,
Lake
I'm like
Druid.
of all the ones, I'm like that's what I'm going to go to, and I go to this park. And I'm driving through this like suburb of Orlando, and I find this weak ass park, like everything you don't want to find in a park, and it's like everything I don't want. But I'm like, this is where I'm going to be. And I'm going to go and I'm going to do something here. I'm going to write down, or I'm going to like somehow do this. I'm going to spend my time. No waste of time. And as soon as I pull in, this cop pulls in behind me. And he parks right next to me, like backs in. And like that's part of like what police do when they're on the shift. Like they pull into places to do whatever it is they do.
Always backing into things.
And this guy's like 10 feet away from me, and I'm starting to feel this, and I'm looking at myself, because normally I've got really historically good cop karma. I just do. Okay. Like I'm not like the cops don't intimidate me. I know how to interact. I've never been arrested. Like I've had plenty of interaction with police, but I don't like. I know a lot of people who carry like I don't carry that. This guy's next to me. And I'm like looking at myself, and like I've been living out of the car for like 5-6 days now, and like I'm looking kind of rough, and like our car looks like it looks like someone like so filled with stuff. And your dashboard, we've got your car, and it's covered with all sorts of things.
My dashboard is like a nature table.
And I was driving through like kind of a nice suburb, like looking like a guy who's casing the suburbs. Or this suburb, and I pull in there, and I catch this like what does this look like? Like, what could this potentially look like? And it's a suburb which I would imagine probably has a high number of, like, maybe elderly, affluent people who are probably aware of, like, the stranger shouldn't be driving slowly through the, because I'm trying to find this park, and I couldn't find it, so I'm driving all slowly. Now the cop's right next to me, I'm like, I really look like a drifter. And all of a sudden, like, I started embodying, like, all of this, like, drifter energy. And I'm like...
You started, like, taking on your own projections.
Completely, like this whole thing is happening, and I'm like, and I'm sitting, and I'm like, I'm trying to work, and I'm like, this cop, I'm like, it's been 20 minutes, and he hasn't budged. And I'm like, and I just heard a story from Dale, and Dale was telling the story about how these cops were, like, he told me a story how he felt these cops were waiting for him, and he was, like, playing this, like, cat and mouse game. He was like, fuck it, I'm just going to get in my car and drive away. And as soon as they drove away, he got pulled over.
What?
Yeah, that's what he said.
What did he get pulled over for? I didn't know this part of the story.
I don't remember. Like, I think he has a history in the town.
Okay.
Like, I don't...
Oh, okay.
And so I'm thinking to myself, it's like, I don't want to get pulled over. Like, I've got my drifter car, and, like, the cop is waiting. Like, all sorts of stuff. Like, all of this is happening in my mind. And, like, it's starting to bubble up. Like, it's starting to bubble up, and I'm like, I don't like when things bubble up. So I go. And I was walking, like, I walked to, like, the spot pot, like, I walked by, went in and out of the car, and we're literally parked, like, 10 feet apart from each other. No one else is in this park. It's the saddest park, which only is available, like through this one part of the neighborhood. So all of this happens, and I'm feeling all of this friggin' pressure. Like, I'm like, why is he there? I don't want him to pull me over. Like, and I'm like, why am I creating this drama? Like, so I've got these two things which are happening inside me. Like, I've got, like, the drama, which is, like, I'm creating, and then I've got this, why are you creating this drama? There's, like, none of this is happening. Like, this is only happening in your mind.
This is spillover for someone who collapses false timelines and identities.
So I'm like, all right. I put my stuff in the car, and I walked right over to the police officer. Like, he's got his window down, and because, like, I couldn't handle, like the one thing I didn't want was I didn't want to get pulled over. Not that, like, I didn't want to go through that exercise. So I'm like, if anything's going to happen, I'm going to come right to it. And I was like, officer, I've got 10 hours to kill before I pick someone up at the airport. I'm not from here. This park is horrible. Could you recommend, like, a good place to go? Something with a little bit more action. And, like, I'm saying this, like, laughing at myself and begrudgingly, and the guy looks at me, and he's, like, so friggin', like, annoyed. Probably because he was just, like, doing a crossword puzzle, or, like, playing, like, you know, whatever, like, online video game. And he looks at me for a minute, and he's like, yeah, and he tells me the name of the park, and I'm like, this guy had no idea I was even next to him. Like, this whole thing is in my head, all of this sort of stuff. And so the reason why I'm telling you this story, and the reason I'm telling them this story, is because this was my setup for going to my parents' house.
Oh my gosh. It's so true, because that night we landed at your parents' house.
We went straight to the parents' house.
Wow. Oh, I don't know. Okay.
All right, so now, like, if that's the setup of what I brought to the villages, now it's in your corner. You arrive at the villages with a totally different energy than me, because you couldn't wait to go.
It's not my parents, so I have been asking Michael when we can go. When can we go back to the villages? For a couple months now.
Because we stopped by there once for one night.
We got a taste of it, and weirdly, because I was like, he was telling me about it, and I was like, oh, it sounds strange. Like, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable in Disney. How could I possibly feel comfortable in a Disney for older people? Like, it's just taking advantage of the young and the old and blah. But the taste that I got of it, I was like, something feels really nice here. And
what was it that felt nice?
So they have these salt pools where no one under the age of 30 is allowed at them. So there's no, like, screaming babies, there's no crazy splashing. Like, if you're truly trying to get, like, you can get that at the salt pools, because it's just a bunch of older people kind of, like, walking around the pool.
Perfectly open for drifters.
Perfectly open for drifters. No one checked our pass cards, which we had. There is an element in the air of, like, we've arrived, like, all that's left now is driving around on golf carts and going to clubs and eating at Disneyfied restaurants. Like, that's sick. But there's also like a way that someone holds their energy of like the I've arrived. Like every moment, like if someone could take that energy and carry it outside of the villages, like I've arrived. I don't have to like show up for anyone except for myself. Right. I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I don't have to like do the rat race.
Right.
I'm just like,
I've arrived at the final chapter.
I've arrived at the final chapter.
Right. It's not like sometimes when I hear I've arrived, it's like I've reached, I guess maybe this would be true, I've reached the pinnacle.
Yeah.
But it's like in the culture, if you live in the villages, you have played by the rules.
You've subscribed to working really hard to get up to the pinnacle.
So, and I've got enough in my retirement that I could buy a house here and play golf, go swimming, and not have to...
And the rest is just an easy downhill slide to death.
Right, exactly. It's like we're no longer putting people in the guillotines. We're just going to give them the booster shot and just allow it to be a slow, like...
So I enjoy the energy of like people...
No pressure.
And like they've reached the pinnacle.
Right.
And I mean like the story worked for them.
Right.
These are a bunch of people who the story worked for them, and I can walk about...
I think you love putting on that costume.
I can walk about and be in my story and be like, yeah, like I've reached the pinnacle too, and like the rest is a downhill easy slide now. I'm so glad to be around people who feel that way.
Yes.
Because I don't have to prove anything.
Right.
Like it's just all the interactions are just like, so much is just dropped in the chit chat. Right. Because they're just in that space. And so
I think it's from the fluoridated water.
Well, yes. There is a dark side to all
like there certainly is.
But
we had a glimmer of sunshine. Well, glimmer of what? What is that?
Lots of sunshine. Oh, you mean
metaphorical.
Yes, with Mark.
Yes.
So then we met someone who follows Michael's work, and he met us at Panera.
We'll talk about Mark. So because of this thing which we're doing right here, I guess I'd mentioned the villages in the past. Mm-hmm. This was a guy who's like, "Hey, Uncle Mike.
Yeah.
I can't believe you live in the villages. I live here. I've been here since 1987. Let me know the next time you're in the villages." And I'm like, this literally came the day we arrived. We arrived in the villages, and we're like trying to think, like, who could this be? Like looking at who lives in the villages. Who in the villages would be familiar with this little sort of thing which we do?
Right.
And you were able to step into the villages with it was a vacation for you. For me, it was like...
Truly vacating. Yeah.
Yes, and to me, it was like there was a little bit of inner work.
Yeah, right, like cop kind of stuff.
Totally, that was what I brought in. And Mark was in the background. Mark is the guy who responded. And I didn't want, I'm like, I got enough balls in the air. Like the last thing I needed to do, and you're like, is to go and coordinate meeting with someone.
Yeah.
And you'd set up ironically enough, a meeting with the astrologers and the villagers.
Oh, that's another thing I love about the villages. They have a perfect infrastructure for as many clubs as you could possibly have.
And I can't stand clubs. I can't stand the clubs. And so you set that up, and you're like, and let's also meet Mark. And in fact, let's see if we could combine the two.
Astrologer club. So I found an astrology club, and we were able to connect and share the starboard. And then Mark came and met us before we met the astrologers.
Yes.
And the whole reason we're going to Panera is because the astrologers wanted to meet us at their steering committee meeting at Panera.
Yes. You're coming from it, this is all of the, you have an organizational, a structured quality to life. We each do, but in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And where my chaos is where your structure is, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. I don't want clubs, I don't want to do I don't want to be efficient with meeting two groups of people at the same, all this sort of stuff. And you're like, we're meeting at Panera with the astrology club. I don't want to meet them. I don't want to meet another person there. All of this, and you're just like, just breathe. Just drink the water. Just drink the village's water. Look at all of the smiles all around. They're all happy. You drink the water. So we go on this. We go on this meeting.
Are you going to get to the water and the Oracle of Delphi and Persephone?
That's where we can conclude.
Great.
So, and this whole story, which we're telling right now, at least from my perspective, is like, this is like how this shift happens. When we talk about like adventures and the shift and the collapsing of false timelines, like, and false identities, like this is a little bit of a demonstration of like
it's intrapersonal, interpersonal, inner view, and it's interpersonal, interpersonal between us, and then we're applying ourselves into this like forward motion.
So okay. We just talked about the previous episode about sand dollars for dollars.
Yes.
Sand dollars for dollars, and this dream walking with currency and all this sort of stuff. It's our final day there, and we go to the astrologers of the villages, the astrologers of the villages. I'm carrying 4 days of me being in my parents' house, like all sorts of things. It was actually much more enjoyable than I let. I'm hamming it up a little bit, and we arrived there. I didn't really know what to expect with the astrologers of the villages, and we go and we meet Mark, and we meet him at Panera,
which is like. It's like Panera's whole thing is like bread. Like I was like, oh yeah, I used to eat there, and like my favorite thing was the bread bowls, and so we were kind of set up to be like, oh, maybe I'll partake in the Panera bread of the villages.
When's the last time you had Panera bread?
Oh my God, probably like 4 or 5 years ago.
Like, how do you typically feel about Panera bread?
It's convenience food. I mean, it's
right.
Like
I can't say it. Like I've got a really high bread bar,
Yes.
and so like the idea of eating at Panera is like it's Disneyland cafe.
Yeah.
Right. Like all this sort of stuff. But we're going to go meet there. And funny, you did say you want to go there. But you're like, oh my goodness, that's the greatest Panera I've ever seen because it's got the villages. It's the villages.
Panera.
So we end up going there, and I come walking in with the starboard. We go and meet Mark, having no idea who we're meeting.
Mm-hmm. He did send us a picture.
He sent us a picture, and all I knew was he's one of us. He's in our club.
Yeah.
And so he goes, and what does he do?
So we identify him. He's sitting at the table, and when we sat down, I mean, this is what stood out to me first. I mean, because this is something that it's something that pops up on my radar because of a practice I've been taught, which is like, do you have a reusable mug? So he comes to Panera with a reusable mug, but it's got his own coffee in it from his house. He's like not having Panera coffee. And then as soon as we both sit down, he pulls out this big brown bag. And he's like, I brought a little something for you guys. And so not only did he bring his own mug, it's just a value I carry, right? Of like no waste and like always be prepared and like, if you're going out in the world, like have your equipment, like have your stuff, right? And if you're going to engage in this like Starbucks
your EDC
culture, your everyday carry. So he's got his everyday carry, which like shows kind of a little bit of his values. And we open this bag, the brown bag, huge store brown bag, and there's a beautiful homemade La Crusette baked loaf of bread, with even like powdered little pictures of like leaf branches on the 4 corners. I just realized that now. It was like a medicine wheel. Like it had 4 quadrants and 4 directions in it.
Yeah.
And so he brought us dough. He brought us like.
Right. We got so sand dollars. Now we're getting dough. All of this stuff is coming in, and Mark doesn't look like the villages.
Right.
Like he's like an
ponytail, like.
Well, they all got ponytails. A little, some do.
Really?
But they still like there's a ponytailed man archetype.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
He's driving like a Corvette.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, this was not him.
Right, and it was a really nice meeting.
Buddha on the shirt. Yes.
Drop that shit is what it said.
Drop that shit.
Right.
Yes.
But he did, and we were able to kind of we had like a real like kind of connection, like human being on the ground connection.
Yes.
The sort of thing which we're talking about, which we're moving offline or moving from online to on ground.
Right.
Like this was
we're utilizing online energy to propel on ground synergy.
And so that happened, and then that spilled over real quickly. How are we on your time? I want to see what we got. We got 5 minutes left.
15.
15?
Yeah. I'm a time bender, okay?
And then we had an impromptu starboard ceremony.
In the middle of Panera.
In the middle of Panera with all of the astrologers from it was the steering committee of the astrologers from the villages.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm laughing because like when we do these, when we've got like the big book, the living ephemeris, like in my mind, like the book is whatever it is. Like I'm not saying the book in itself is magic, but the process of carrying a book around the world and doing a starboard ceremony and having everyone sign it, like that's magic.
Signature.
That is magic, and we're doing that, and we're like, we did it in the villages, in the Panera, and like something happened there. And Mark to me felt like he was the witness because there was.
He's not an astrologer.
He's not an astrologer.
And he even sat back a little bit from the group. He was like watching us do the starboard thing, but he was the witness.
He was the witness. There were 5-6 people of the astrologers of the villages, and they understood the language of the heavens. Mm-hmm. And whereas Mark may not have, he heard the note we were carrying.
Yes.
And so like that's why he was the witness.
Right, because he.
And so let me go and I want to round this out. This one last piece for me, how the story kind of ended up with our chapter in the villages. So I came into this villages experience holding like, you know, it's a lifetime experience of shedding your childhood cloaks, you know, when you return home. You know, that's why I started this conversation. Like, we'd returned to your childhood home, and now we're back at mine. And I think my childhood home probably carries a bit more charge than your childhood home. Mm-hmm. So we're there, and me and my father don't exactly have the same value system.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we had a really nice time. We had a nice time these 4 days. Like, in fact, you were a really nice variable or addition, because I think he was on his best behavior because he was flirting with you the whole time.
I wouldn't say that.
I would.
That's hamming it up.
But, so anyway, so how the whole thing, like I came in with like, you know, envisioning my father literally as a police officer on my back, even when he's not. Like, I'll be the first to admit, like, the stuff which I'm carrying, like, it could all be me. Like, my dad's like, I don't know why you carry any of this stuff. Like, I don't. Yeah. But anyway, so we get to go back to my parents' house, and we've got this, and they know, they have no idea what we do, and, you know, they kind of think we're a little bit nuts. And we go back there, and we've got the bread, and we have like the starboard, and within the villages, and I want to be able to apply a degree of anonymity here, like for Mark. But within the villages, there is almost like I don't want to say mythic, but there's definitely a recognition of the family that's behind the villages. Like, they have them, like, yes, they're always complaining about them, but they're like, you know, they're really successful people. Look what they built. They built the villages. And if you live in the villages, you've already demonstrated that you value success.
Right.
So there's this thing. And Mark is like, he's related to this village's family. Like, he is part and parcel. So my father's thinking like, you're gonna go and meet some like drifter bum just like you and your lady friend here who I'm hitting on.
Oh my gosh, you're really embellishing this. Go ahead.
But at the same time, we got to go and say, it's like, oh yeah, well, this is who he is. He's actually part of the family.
We met the prince of the villages.
Right, and it cracked my father because he has in his mind, like, you know, we're meeting another, like, drifter. Mm-hmm. And, like, his drifter has to equal a certain sort of background. And when the drifter was from also the family, which he had up on high, he was like,
my son's doing something right.
Well, I don't think necessarily that, but it was like, it enabled like that crack for him. And like, you know, everything, it was like this whole sort of...
And then your mom,
okay,
she says the dough thing.
What does she say?
remember she's like, oh, he gave you dough. Like money, yeah. Like,
yes.
And we didn't have that conversation with your mom at all
Right,
about
right.
like how currency is not just in paper.
Right.
And your mom was just like, oh, what a gift, he gave you dough.
And that was when we realized.
And there was this interesting thing with matzah and like your mom's Jewish heritage, your Jewish culture, and her making matzah brie for us, and that's the unleavened bread. And Mark gave us leavened bread. And he saved us, and I'm just putting that in air quotes because this is like a story that I'm saying. He saved us from eating the Panera bread.
Yeah.
And then as we're telling this story to the next and last leg of our trip was with our friends from Camp Hill, Kimberton, and going to Venice, Florida. As we were telling them this story, my friend Emily, she teaches art and like art history at a Waldorf school, so she knows like all of these interesting mythology. You guys could talk for hours. She tells the story of Persephone and like her journey and interaction with the underworld, and it was like she got stuck. You know, she like resisted and wasn't gonna get trapped, but then whoever it was, I can't remember this character's
Was it
name.
Hades?
I think so, Hades, yeah.
Is that the same mythological name? It's whoever the Lord of the Underworld is.
Yeah. And
whose name changes
and
based
Persephone
upon.
is like, okay, like, you know, I'm leaving. Like this, I'm not staying here.
Right.
And he's like, okay, let me just give you some bread. Let me just give you some food, like some bread for your journey back out through the underworld?
Okay.
Or is that what they call it in Greek mythology?
Maybe.
Okay. Anyways, it's akin to hell.
Right.
It was like the Lord of the Underworld, Hades. And Persephone, she got caught there, or she got caught in a pattern or a cycle of having to visit.
Yes.
Because she ate the bread. She like broke bread and ate bread and so she was like, wow. She's like, he like saved you from like breaking bread with like Panera of the Villages, like the Disney-fied, like she's like, don't drink the water, Christy. He saved you. He saved both of you. He gave you real dough baked from his heart. And then we took that dough and we ate it, that bread, and we ate it with your parents, and we ate it with Emily and Derek, and it became this real like rounded out sharing experience that was like started by Mark, just, you know, out of whatever. He probably didn't have this like mythical like, oh, I'm going to bake them bread to save them from like the underworld of the Villages. But it kind of like that's
what dream walking is.
That's what dream walking is. Like we were like, he gave us a huge bread bowl. Like this is what I wanted. All I want to do is cut out the center and fill it with soup now. But instead we shared it. And we shared it with like 4 other people. Yes, we did. And that was beautiful. So thank you, Mark, if you're watching.
So, how do we wrap this up?
Well, so that's the Villages.
That's the Villages.
That's the Villages. Just like navigating, collapsing false identities, false timelines, false narratives, getting like caught up in them and like easing through them and whatever, all of that.
Right.
In a highly like where that work that we are doing internally, our shifting, is actually like played out right in front of your eyes, where they actually have false timelines, like history plaques on the buildings that are not real. Like you read them, and I was like, there was a bank here, and both you and your dad. This is the one and only time that I think you and your dad were like on the same page and like relating in a deeper way. No, Christy, there was never a bank there. And your dad was like, you know, your dad was saying this is what was there, and you're saying like you were both on the same page of like, yeah, that's false and it's not real, and it's like, it was anger. Like that was my breaking point when I was like, what? Everything here is just to like make a sale. Like, but it feels so good. And I think there's a truth in it, right? Like I think the Villages brought for me a truth about my being and like what I'm looking for in others, which is just this like relaxed, and which we do find in other places, but this is a massive amount of people. And then there's like the lies, There's the truth and the lies. And that's like always an inner shift thing. But
I can hear that in your throat, in your voice. Like that literally upsets you that they tell you that it was a lie. The whole thing is based upon a lie.
They constructed a whole town center based on a lie. So anyways, the Villages was that kind of like the inner work that we bring to the shifting boldly and blatantly, like out in front of your eyes. Like, this is all made up.
Right.
It's all not real. And so you can just walk around, read it, and I mean, what I really want to do is tear all those plaques down. Right. It's very confusing.
Right.
And how many people in the Villages do you think like read those and like are like, oh, like that's a good story, or like that's like that was here? Or do you think they all know?
I think they all know, but they forget, or like
it evokes something. It still evokes something that's false, and that's what makes me angry.
Well, what it really does, in my opinion, what it really does is it gets compliance.
Yeah.
That's why every dictator wants to have 100% turnout in the elections, because it implies compliance.
Right. It's not about what it says. It's about like the imagery that it casts.
And an acceptance from a witness without calling it out.
Yes.
And so that's
we walked around calling
collapsing false time words. So
collapse.
So we did this. Like this was a real experience with a real person.
Yeah.
Who in our next episode, our last episode of Adventures of the Shift, this Florida trip, it goes 2 levels deeper because we met 2 other people. Yeah. And this is both like a metaphorical reality, like the dream walking, and it's also bleeding over into a like we're meeting folks. Like that's what this is really all about, is like from online to on ground.
And in Venice, you became a celebrity in 2 ways.
We'll talk about that in the next one.
I know. The next one. I just want to give a teaser.
All right, that's fair enough.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Until the next one. See you guys.